I spent $200,000 to save my brother's life, and my parents handed him our grandma's entire inheritance. I couldn't believe it. I still remember the day Tyler collapsed at work and was rushed to the hospital. The doctors said he needed immediate surgery, and the cost was astronomical, over $200,000. I didn't hesitate. I had saved every penny from years of nursing, and I even took a loan to cover the rest. I couldn't stand the thought of losing him, no matter how irresponsible he had been. Tyler has always been reckless with money. Ever since he graduated college, he bounced from one failed job to another, always blaming the world for his failures. But when he lay in that hospital bed, pale and weak, I couldn't think about his flaws. I just wanted him to survive. I called our parents, George and Linda, expecting at least a word of gratitude or concern, but they barely reacted. They were more worried about appearances than their own children's lives. After the surgery, Tyler slowly recovered, and I stayed by his side every single day. I made sure he followed the doctor's instructions, helped him regain his strength, and even managed his appointments. It was exhausting, both emotionally and financially, but I believed it would bring our family closer. I hoped my parents would finally recognize my efforts and treat me fairly. But the shock came a week later. George and Linda called a family meeting and casually announced that Tyler would receive our grandma's entire inheritance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All the property, the investments, everything Grandma had worked for, they were giving to him. And me? My years of hard work, my sacrifices, and even the money I had spent to save him didn't matter at all. They barely acknowledged my contribution, acting as if it had been expected. I felt a wave of anger and betrayal. How could they reward someone so undeserving while ignoring the one who had risked everything? I tried to speak, to explain that I had covered his medical bills myself, but George waved me off, saying, "Family takes care of each other, Marin. Tyler needs this more than you ever did." I wanted to scream, but I held my composure. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, feeling a mixture of grief and determination. I realized I couldn't depend on my family for fairness or recognition. If I wanted respect and security, I had to create it for myself. I decided then that I would build my own path, one that didn't rely on anyone else's approval. Tyler might have the inheritance, but I had something even more valuable: my resilience, my intelligence, and my drive to succeed. From that moment, I vowed I wouldn't just survive, I would thrive. And when the day came for my parents and Tyler to see what I had built, they would finally understand that loyalty and hard work could never be ignored forever. The betrayal hurt, but it also lit a fire inside me that I would never let die. When I found out Tyler needed surgery, I felt panic and fear. The doctors said it would cost over $200,000, and without it, he might not survive. I knew our parents would hesitate, as they always did with money, so I decided I had to act. Even though Tyler and I had our fights and he often caused problems, I couldn't let him die. I checked my savings first. I had worked hard for years as a nurse, saving money for emergencies and small investments. It wasn't enough to cover the full cost, so I had to take out a loan to make up the difference. Every decision I made felt heavy, but I didn't hesitate. I called the hospital, arranged the payment, and signed all the necessary paperwork. Tyler didn't fully understand what I was doing, and he kept apologizing weekly from his bed, but I told him to focus on getting better. Paying that money drained me, both financially and emotionally. I had sacrificed my comfort, my savings, and my peace of mind, but I kept telling myself it was worth it. Tyler was my brother, and I couldn't stand the thought of losing him. I also hoped this would finally show our parents that I worked hard, I cared, and I deserved respect. I wanted them to see the effort, to notice the sacrifices I made for family, and to treat me fairly. The surgery was long and stressful. I sat in the waiting room, biting my nails, checking my phone constantly, and praying silently. When the doctors finally came out, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. Tyler was stable, and the operation was a success, but the weight of the cost and the effort lingered in my mind. I had given everything I could to save him, and I expected that my parents would at least acknowledge it. Even as Tyler slowly recovered, I helped him through every step. I reminded him to take his medication, pushed him to do small exercises, and stayed by his side for weeks. I didn't complain, even when I was tired and my own work demanded attention. I wanted him to regain his strength fully, and I wanted our parents to see the difference between his care and what I had done for him. I kept thinking that after all this, they would finally respect me, maybe even apologize for past mistakes. I imagined a moment where they would admit that my sacrifices mattered, that I had acted selflessly when others would not. I didn't realize then how wrong I was about what they valued, and how soon I would learn the real meaning of betrayal. When Tyler finally came home from the hospital, I thought things would change. I expected at least a little gratitude from our parents, maybe even respect for what I had done. I hoped they would see how much I had sacrificed for Tyler and for the family. I imagined that they would finally treat me fairly. Instead, George and Linda called a family meeting. I felt nervous, but also hopeful, thinking maybe they would acknowledge my efforts. But as soon as they started talking, I realized I was wrong. They said they had decided to give Tyler our grandma's entire inheritance. Everything, her house, her investments, and all the money she had saved over the years, was going to him. I couldn't believe my ears. My heart sank. I felt frozen. It was like the world had turned upside down. After all I had done for Tyler, after spending my savings and taking a loan to pay for his surgery, they were rewarding him instead of me. They didn't even mention my name, didn't say a single word about what I had done. It felt like everything I had sacrificed didn't matter at all. Tyler looked confused, like he didn't know how to react. He smiled weakly, maybe a little embarrassed, but I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. My parents spoke as if this decision was perfectly normal, as if it was the right thing to do. I wanted to scream at them, to tell them how unfair it was, but the words stuck in my throat. I felt a heavy weight in my chest, a mix of anger and sadness. It wasn't just about the money or the property. It was the betrayal, the lack of recognition, and the unfairness of it all. I had given everything I could to save my brother, and they treated him as if he deserved more than me. I remember sitting quietly after the meeting, trying to make sense of it. I kept asking myself why they would favor Tyler over me, why they would ignore all my hard work and sacrifices. It was painful to watch them hand him everything our grandma had worked so hard for. The people who were supposed to care about me the most didn't see my value. I realized in that moment that my parents' idea of fairness was completely different from mine. Their love seemed conditional, based on who they thought deserved it rather than who had worked for it. It was heartbreaking to accept that I couldn't rely on them to do what was right. I left the room feeling empty, with a mix of sorrow and determination. I knew that the way they treated Tyler now didn't define me. I had to find my own way to be respected and valued. Their choice hurt me deeply, but it also made me realize I couldn't depend on anyone else for fairness. I had to stand on my own. After hearing my parents' decision, I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and confusion. It was hard to understand how they could reward Tyler and completely ignore everything I had done. I kept thinking about the money I had spent, the stress I had gone through, and the nights I stayed awake by his side. None of it seemed to matter to them. I felt invisible, like my efforts had been completely wasted. At first, I couldn't stop replaying the meeting in my mind. I kept asking myself if I had done something wrong, if I should have expected less, or if I was simply too naive. The betrayal cut deep. It wasn't just about the money or the inheritance. It was the way my parents acted like I didn't exist. I felt like all my hard work, my care, and my sacrifices didn't mean anything to them. I didn't want to show my pain to Tyler. He already looked relieved and happy, and I didn't want to ruin that for him. But inside, I was burning with frustration. I felt used, as if my love and effort had only been a tool for everyone else to ignore me. The thought of being treated unfairly by my own family was unbearable. I called my friends, Samantha and Joel, hoping to find someone to talk to. Samantha listened quietly, letting me vent without judgment. Joel reminded me to stay calm and focus on the long term, saying that my worth wasn't measured by what my parents decided to give Tyler. They reminded me that I was strong, capable, and smart, and that I could build my own life without relying on anyone else. Their words helped a little, but the hurt didn't go away completely. I realized that no matter how much I cared, I couldn't force my family to see my value. It was their loss, not mine. I thought about all the things I had done for Tyler, and while I felt pain, I also knew I hadn't done it for recognition. I had acted because I cared, not because I expected a reward. Still, I couldn't ignore the fire that had started inside me. The betrayal made me determined. I decided I wouldn't let anyone, not Tyler, not my parents, define my life or my worth. I had to take control of my own future, make my own successes, and show that I could thrive even when others doubted me. That night, I sat quietly and made a promise to myself. I would turn this anger and hurt into strength. I would work hard, build something for myself, and never depend on anyone else to feel valued. The road ahead would be difficult, but I knew I couldn't stay stuck in this pain. I had to move forward, stronger and wiser than before. After days of feeling hurt and angry, I realized that I couldn't change what my parents had done. Tyler had the inheritance now, and no amount of complaining or pleading would fix it. I had to stop dwelling on the past and start thinking about my own future. I knew I needed to find a way to protect myself and make sure I was never ignored or powerless again. I began reading everything I could about property law and investments. I wanted to understand how money, property, and ownership worked so I could make smart choices. I spent hours studying, taking notes, and asking questions. It wasn't easy, and sometimes I felt overwhelmed, but I kept reminding myself that this was for my future. I needed knowledge, and knowledge would give me power. Next, I looked at ways to build a career that would give me independence. I had always been good with organization, details, and people, so I decided real estate management was a path I could pursue. I started small, helping friends and acquaintances with rental properties and learning how the business worked from the ground up. Every deal I worked on, every property I learned about, added to my confidence. I also made a plan for long-term success. I wanted to invest wisely, not just make quick money. I researched markets, studied trends, and learned how to spot opportunities before anyone else did. It felt like building a ladder, step by step, where each piece of knowledge and experience would bring me closer to being truly independent. While I worked, I thought about my family. I didn't plan to confront them yet. First, I needed a foundation, a position where I could stand strong. I wanted to reach a point where my parents and Tyler could no longer ignore me, where they would see that my life didn't depend on their approval. The thought of gaining that kind of power kept me focused and motivated. Some nights, I stayed up late making spreadsheets, calculating budgets, and imagining the life I wanted to build. I pictured owning properties, making decisions that mattered, and having security that no one could take away from me. Every little step I took reminded me that I was in control of my own destiny now. I also worked on my confidence and mindset. I told myself I was capable, that I didn't need anyone's approval to succeed. Each small victory, every lesson learned, became a part of my strength. The anger and hurt I had felt slowly turned into determination and focus. By the time a year had passed, I had started to see progress. I wasn't just surviving, I was building something real for myself. I had plans, skills, and a growing sense of power. Tyler might have the inheritance, but I was creating something even stronger. My own future, built by my own hands, and no one could take that away from me. As Tyler got used to having all that money, he changed. The small, careless decisions he had always made now seemed bigger because he had the inheritance backing him. He bought expensive cars, went on vacations, and spent money on things he didn't really need. Every time I saw him brag about his wealth, it made my blood boil. He never once thanked me for what I had done to save him. It was as if my sacrifices didn't exist. Even when I reminded him gently about the surgery or the money I had spent, he shrugged it off or made a joke. His arrogance wasn't just frustrating, it hurt deeply. I had poured so much into him, and now he acted like he didn't owe anyone anything. Seeing him so careless with money made me realize something important. I couldn't rely on family to value me or my work. If I wanted respect, I would have to earn it in a way they couldn't ignore. I knew then that I needed to keep building my life stronger and smarter, so no one could ever dismiss me again. Tyler's arrogance also gave me a plan. I didn't want revenge in a mean way, but I wanted him to see that wealth alone doesn't make a person better or smarter. I wanted to prove that hard work, intelligence, and determination mattered more than luck or inheritance. Every careless choice he made reminded me why I needed to succeed and claim the respect I deserved. I focused harder on my own goals. I studied property deals, found investment opportunities, and learned to manage money wisely. The contrast between his careless spending and my careful planning kept me motivated. Every time I felt frustrated by his arrogance, I reminded myself that my future was in my hands, and his mistakes wouldn't affect my success. Even friends noticed the difference. Samantha told me I was stronger than ever, and Joel said Tyler's arrogance would be his downfall. I started to believe them. I knew that his pride and carelessness would eventually show, and when that day came, I wanted to be ready. At home, I tried to stay calm when I saw Tyler flaunting his lifestyle. I didn't confront him directly, but I kept track of everything he did. I knew patience was my advantage. While he wasted the inheritance, I was building something real, something that would earn me recognition, independence, and respect. It wasn't easy to watch, but I used the anger and frustration as fuel. I reminded myself every day that I had to work harder, think smarter, and stay focused. Tyler's arrogance was not just annoying. It was my motivation to rise above, to prove that I could succeed on my own terms, and that respect could be earned, not given. By the end of the year, I felt stronger and more determined than ever. Tyler might have had the money, but I was gaining something more important: power, independence, and a clear path to prove my worth to the people who had doubted me. Over the next 3 years, I focused entirely on building my life. I started small, buying a few properties and learning how to manage them well. I took time to understand the market, checking every detail before making a decision. Each investment taught me something new, and slowly, I began to see my hard work pay off. I was careful with money, unlike Tyler. I didn't waste it on unnecessary things. Instead, I reinvested my profits, improved the properties, and expanded my portfolio. Every deal I completed made me more confident and more independent. I could feel myself growing stronger, not just financially, but in every way that mattered. People in my community began to notice. They saw how professional and capable I was, and they started coming to me for advice and help. I gained respect not because of money or inheritance, but because of my knowledge, skill, and determination. That respect felt different. It was earned and lasting. Meanwhile, Tyler continued to act like he had everything under control. He still spent carelessly and showed off his wealth, but he never took the time to build anything meaningful. He underestimated me completely. He had no idea how much I had grown or how far I could go. I also learned to trust myself more. Every choice I made, from small investments to bigger property deals, reinforced my belief that I didn't need anyone else to decide my worth. I had my own path now, one I controlled completely. I no longer waited for approval from my parents or anyone else. By the end of the 3 years, I had built what I could call a small real estate empire. I owned multiple properties, had steady income, and had made connections that opened even more opportunities. Tyler's inheritance might have given him a head start, but my hard work and careful planning had created something stronger, something sustainable. I started to feel proud of myself for the first time in a long while. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I could walk into any room knowing I had earned my place, and that people respected me for my efforts, not because of luck or family favors. Tyler still ignored everything I had done, but that no longer mattered. I had what I needed: security, confidence, and a life I had built entirely on my own. He had money, but I had something far more powerful: independence and the knowledge that I could handle anything life threw at me. I decided it was time to visit my parents' house. I didn't go there to argue or beg. I went quietly, as if it were just a normal visit. I wanted to see them, but I also wanted to show them what I had built for myself over the past years. I knew this visit would be different from any before. When I arrived, Tyler was there, showing off a new car he had bought and talking loudly about a vacation he had just planned. I stayed calm and smiled politely, pretending to be interested. Inside, I was already planning what I would say. I didn't want to fight. I wanted them to see the truth clearly, without any confusion. I started talking about my work. I explained how I had invested in properties, managed rentals, and built a growing business from scratch. I mentioned the deals I had completed and the clients who trusted me. I spoke confidently, showing that my success wasn't luck or inheritance. It was the result of hard work and careful planning. Then I turned to Tyler. I didn't raise my voice, but I pointed out how recklessly he had been spending his inheritance. I mentioned how quickly some of his money had disappeared and how little he had done to secure his future. I explained calmly that wealth alone didn't mean stability or respect, and that his careless choices were already causing problems. I also addressed my parents. I reminded them gently but firmly how their favoritism had backfired. By giving Tyler everything, they had ignored the one who had worked, sacrificed, and shown responsibility. I didn't accuse or yell. I simply laid out the facts, letting them see the contrast between what Tyler had done and what I had achieved. My parents were quiet. They looked shocked, maybe even guilty, but I didn't let their silence distract me. I kept my composure, knowing that anger or emotion wouldn't make them understand as clearly as the truth would. I wanted them to see the difference between carelessness and effort, between arrogance and dedication. By the end of the conversation, I could feel the change. Tyler's confident smirk had faded, replaced by surprise and unease. My parents were silent, finally realizing that their choice to favor Tyler had not brought happiness or respect, only division and disappointment. I left the estate that day feeling a mix of relief and quiet satisfaction. I hadn't shouted or demanded anything. I had simply shown them what I had built, calmly exposing the truth. And in that moment, I knew I had reclaimed my power and proved, without a doubt, that hard work and responsibility mattered more than inheritance or favoritism. After the confrontation, I could see the change in my parents. George and Linda had always acted as if they knew best, but now their expressions told a different story. For the first time, they were forced to see me for who I truly was. Not just their daughter who followed rules, but a capable, intelligent, and strong woman who had built her own life from nothing. They were quiet at first, clearly uncomfortable. I could feel their regret, even if they didn't say it out loud immediately. I watched as they looked at Tyler, then back at me, realizing that their choice to favor him had caused more harm than good. Their favoritism hadn't brought the happiness or harmony they had expected. It had created tension, anger, and distance within the family. I stayed calm during this moment. I didn't shout or argue, and I didn't try to humiliate them. Instead, I spoke with honesty and clarity. I told them that I understood their love for Tyler, but that fairness and recognition were important too. I explained how their actions had hurt me, and how their favoritism had only made the family weaker instead of stronger. George and Linda listened quietly, their faces showing a mix of shame and sorrow. It was clear they were reflecting on the mistakes they had made. I could see that they realized the depth of the pain their decisions had caused, not just to me, but to the whole family dynamic. They were finally facing the reality that respect and effort could not be ignored without consequences. Even as they showed signs of regret, I maintained my boundaries. I forgave them in my heart because holding on to anger would only hurt me, not them. But I also made it clear that forgiveness did not mean I would let myself be overlooked again. I had built my independence, and I would continue to protect it. Tyler, on the other hand, shifted uncomfortably. He had underestimated me for so long, and now he saw the consequences of his carelessness. He couldn't hide the unease in his posture or the way he avoided my eyes. He realized that I was no longer someone to take for granted. In that moment, I felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. I had faced the very people who had hurt me the most, and I had done it with strength and dignity. My parents were forced to acknowledge my resilience, intelligence, and hard work. They saw, without words, that their favoritism had caused division, and that their choices had consequences they had not anticipated. I left the conversation feeling strong. I had not only proven my worth, but also reclaimed my voice in the family. I had shown that respect is earned, not given, and that even when betrayal and favoritism try to hold someone down, determination and hard work will always rise above. After everything had settled, I finally felt a sense of peace. I had worked hard for years, faced betrayal, and built my life from the ground up. Now, I had financial independence and a career I could be proud of. People in my community respected me, and for the first time, I felt truly seen for who I was, not just as someone's daughter or sister. Tyler had begun to realize that money alone didn't make life easy or bring respect. Some of his careless decisions had caused him problems, and he started to understand that he couldn't rely on wealth alone. He looked at me differently now, no longer seeing me as someone beneath him, but as someone capable and strong. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the lessons life had forced him to learn. My parents had also changed. They acknowledged, quietly but clearly, that their favoritism had been wrong. They saw the effort, intelligence, and persistence I had shown. While I forgave them in my heart, I also kept my boundaries. I had learned that forgiveness didn't mean giving up control or letting anyone take advantage of me again. I took time to reflect on everything I had gone through. The betrayal and hurt had been painful, but they had also taught me valuable lessons. I realized that sacrifices are meaningful when they come from love or responsibility, but they cannot replace self-worth or action. I had spent time and energy helping Tyler, and while he didn't always appreciate it, my choices had shaped who I had become. I also understood that family loyalty is important, but blind loyalty can be dangerous. It can allow unfairness to continue and let people take advantage of your efforts. Real respect comes from proving yourself, standing strong, and making decisions that protect your own future. Looking back, I felt vindicated, not because I had proven anyone wrong for the sake of pride, but because I had stayed true to myself and my values. I had built a life that was mine, independent of anyone else's approval or control. I had taken control of my future, and that gave me more satisfaction than I had ever imagined. I smiled quietly to myself, thinking about how far I had come. Tyler had learned lessons he couldn't ignore. My parents had faced the truth, and I had found my strength. The journey had been hard, but it had shaped me into someone who could survive betrayal, overcome challenges, and emerge stronger. I had discovered that self-respect, determination, and action matter more than anything else, even family loyalty or inherited wealth. Do you think Maren made the right choice by focusing on herself instead of her family, or should she have given them another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe with the notification bell for more stories.